Hi, it's Nicole. This is the third year I participate in Jane Austen July, and it has really helped me to get to know Jane Austen's person and works. I have loved seeing how English literature evolves through history and across genres since I started reading English classics. I've been reading around Jane Austen every July to see how she became the writer she was. The prompts for Jane Austen July really helped me to do that. My favorite prompts are read something that's not one of her main 6 novels, so that led me to read her letters and the history of England. Read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen, which led me to read Evelina by Fanny Burney, one of Jane Austen's favorite authors, and Lover's Vow by Elizabeth Inchbald, which famously features in Mansfield Park. Both prompts help me to see the context of her works. And the third one, read a non-fiction work about Jane Austen or her time, makes me search out non-fiction on her, and among many good titles led me to this one, The Genius of Jane Austen. The Genius of Jane Austen is a non-fiction work that focuses on the influence of theatre on her. If you've been following my reading progress, you know that I got into theatre in the last couple of years. It was wonderful that there's a book that combines those two things. He explains the English theatre tradition and how it makes Jane Austen Jane Austen. I read this book last year along with Mansfield Park and Lover's Vows. Mapping the characters in the play onto the characters in the novel gives another layer of meaning that I had no idea about before. I talked about this in my July wrap-up last year. If you are interested, I'll link it here and in the description box. In the rest of the book, the name Sheridan and 3 of his works, The Critiques, The Rivals, and The School for Scandal, appear repeatedly. So for this Jane Austen July, I decided to read and watch The Rivals by Richard Brinsley Sheridan, who, according to Paula Byrne, had a tremendous impact on Jane Austen's works. Just in case you are wondering how, out of the 3, I decided to read The Rivals, it's because I came across it in a secondhand bookshop. It's all a delicate balance between vigorous planning and accepting cosmic signs. So I'm going to tell you firstly who's Sheridan, and secondly what The Rivals is about, and lastly a few similarities that we can spot in Jane Austen's novel Sense and Sensibility. Richard Brinsley Sheridan was born in Dublin in Ireland in 1751, which is 24 years before Jane Austen was born, and they died a year apart. Both of his parents had careers related to theatre. His mother was a playwright and novelist, and her plays were produced in London. His father was for a while an actor. They moved from Dublin to England when Sheridan was 7. He was educated properly, and the next thing we know, he fought a duel at age 20 or so for the honor of a woman he loved. He was badly wounded and nearly died, and after that, at age 21, he eloped with the woman and settled in London. The marriage sounds quite problematic. Both the husband and the wife had lovers. In terms of his career, similar to Shakespeare, Sheridan started as a playwright and became a theatre owner. He bought shares in a theatre, the Drury Lane Theatre in London, and produced his plays there. And, similar to Shakespeare, his theatre also burned down about 200 years after Shakespeare's theatre burned down. After Sheridan became successful as a playwright, he entered the House of Commons and started his second career as a politician. He became ill and died aged 64 in poverty. Before you feel too sorry for him, like I did, he was in debt because of heavy drinking and gambling. He was also reported to be a social climber and had no problem with backstabbing. I couldn't tell at all when I read his play. Should we take the author's life and character into consideration when judging a literary work? Apparently, he was well known enough for good or ill reasons that when he died, a lot of nobilities attended his funeral. He was buried in the Poets' Corner of Westminster Abbey. His interaction with women was singled out on the Wikipedia page and sounds torturous and problematic. Here's one short account that fleshes out this side of his character with some details. In 1805, Sheridan had escalated his harassment of Harriet Spencer, she was an aristocratic woman, to anonymously sending her threatening letters. As they had been longtime friends and former lovers, Harriet quickly deduced the author's identity as Sheridan's from his handwriting. Sheridan accosted Harriet in public and made a scene any chance he could, reproaching her for not loving him enough and declaring his undying love for her. Despite his cruelty towards her, Harriet was kind to him on his deathbed in 1816. In return, Sheridan grasped her hand hard and told her he would haunt her after his death. Harriet, petrified, asked why. Having persecuted her all his life, he was determined to continue his persecution after death, because I am resolved you shall remember me. This is fascinating to read. After reading The Rivals, his behavior sounds so much like one of the main characters in The Rivals. The Rivals is a comedy in 5 acts, first performed at Covent Garden Theatre in 1775. It was Sheridan's first play and was an immediate flop. One of the actors was hit by an apple during the performance. He stopped the show and asked the audience if it was him or the story. The audience said it was both. Sheridan rewrote the play in 10 days, and when it reopened, people loved it. I'm really curious about the editing and would love to see the original. I think it's quite masterly. The play is set in 18th century Bath, and to put it very simply, it's about 2 pairs of lovers and the comical mix-up before they finally get together. The structure of the story and the relationship between characters remind me of Shakespeare's comedies, especially the comic effect caused by misunderstandings and confusion. In the first scene, we meet 2 minor characters who tell us what we need to know about the main characters of the play. The son and heir of a baronet, Jack Absolute, creates himself a second identity, Ensign Beverley, which reminds me of the importance of being earnest, to pursue the love of Lydia Languish, who is rich beyond compare. Then we are introduced to Lydia Languish. Her character is a 2-dimensional stereotype. Paula Byrne calls her the epitome of the misguided reader of romantic novels. I love the way that specific characteristic is presented to us in Act 1, Scene 2. I think it's a brilliant use of the form of theatre. The scene starts with Lucy the maid talking mid-conversation, just like a lot of the opening scenes in Shakespeare. Indeed, ma'am, I traversed half the town in search of it. I don't believe there's a circulating library in Bath I haven't been at. And could not you get the reward of constancy? No, indeed, ma'am. Nor the fatal connection? No, indeed, ma'am. Nor the mistakes of the heart? We immediately get an idea of what kind of young woman Lydia is by the book titles she asks for. She's probably full of fancy, and her every notion about love is from silly romantic novels. Her confession with her good friend, cousin Julia, confirms our impression. But you have not heard the worst. Unfortunately, I had quarrelled with my poor Beverley just before my aunt made the discovery that she has a lover, and I have not seen him since to make it up. What was his offence? Nothing at all. But I don't know how he was. As often as we had been together, we had never had a quarrel, and somehow I was afraid he would never give me an opportunity. So last Thursday, I wrote a letter to myself to inform myself that Beverley was at that time paying his addresses to another woman. I signed it, your friend unknown, showed it to Beverley, charged him with his falsehood, put myself in a violent passion, and vowed I'd never see him more. She's hopeless and worse than we feared. Jack Absolute knows her well, that's why he pretends to be a penniless ensign. For though I am convinced my little Lydia would elope with me as Ensign Beverley, yet am I by no means certain that she would take me with the impediment of our friend's consent, a regular humdrum wedding, and the reversion of a good fortune on my side. No, no. The idea of eloping with a penniless soldier to Scotland is terribly exciting and romantic. She wants the family to object so she can rebel. She wants to be poor and cut off because that's the test of true love in novels. She would not have agreed to marry him if he was a perfectly suitable husband candidate who will marry her properly in a church. And he's completely right. As soon as Lydia finds out that her poor Beverley is actually Jack Absolute, it's not necessary to elope, and their parents approve of their marriage, she ends the relationship. The second couple in this comic story is Julia and Falkland. As Jack suffers at the hands of Lydia, the good and rational Julia suffers at the hands of Falkland. Julia describes him as, though his pride calls for this full return, his humility makes him undervalue those qualities in him which would entitle him to it, and not feeling why he should be loved to the degree he wishes, he still suspects that he is not loved enough. I find it a rather complicated sentence. I think he means Falkland has an unreasonable expectation of love from Julia, but at the same time, he's very insecure about himself and doesn't think Julia loves him very much. Again, his first appearance makes a strong impression. It's both extremely funny and shocking because my goodness, he's like me. This is Falkland talking to Jack about his worry for Julia while they are apart. What grounds for apprehension did you say? Heavens, are there not 1,000? A fear for her spirits, her health, her life. My absence may fret her. Her anxiety for my return, her fears for me, may oppress her gentle temper, and for her health, does not every hour bring me cause to be alarmed? If it rains, some shower might even then have chilled her delicate frame. If the wind be keen, some rude blast may have affected her. The heat of noon, the dew of the evening, may endanger the life of her, for whom only I value mine. Oh, Jack, when delicate and feeling souls are separated, there is not a feature in the sky, not a movement of the elements, not an aspiration of the breeze, but hints some cause for a lover's apprehension. He's been unhappy because he doesn't know whether Julia is well, which is understandable and very sweet. But within seconds, we discover that he's even more unhappy when he finds out Julia is in good health and spirit. I have not seen Miss Melville yet, sir. I hope she enjoyed full health and spirits in Devonshire. Never knew her better in my life, sir. Never better. Always blushes and blooms. She has been as healthy as the German spa. Indeed, I did hear that she had been a little indisposed. Force, sir, only said to vex you. Quite the reverse, I assure you. There, Jack. You see, she has the advantage of me. I had almost fretted myself ill. Now, are you angry with your mistress for not having been sick? Oh, no, you misunderstand me. Yes, surely a little trifling indisposition is not an unnatural consequence of absence from those we love. Now, confess, isn't there something unkind in this violent, robust, unfeeling health? Oh, it was very unkind of her to be well in your absence, to be sure. Well, sir, but you were saying that Miss Melville has been so exceedingly well. What then? She has been merry and gay, I suppose? Always in spirits, hey? Merry as crickets. She has been the belle and spirit of the company wherever she has been. So lively and entertaining, so full of wit and humour. There, Jack, there! Oh, by my soul, there's an innate levity in woman that nothing can overcome. What? Happy, and I away? How can she be so happy among friends, in blooming good health and humour, having a big appetite, sleeping sweet and sound, talking and laughing, singing and dancing, while I've been worried sick about her? She clearly is not affected by being away from me. She does not love me, and she has a heart of stone. I would never say these things out loud, but don't I remember myself thinking like him? He's shockingly twisted and negative, but I've never met a character thinking so like me before. But at the same time, it's so extreme and hilarious, I can't help laughing at him and at myself. Do you remember the story about Sheridan I read earlier? How can you treat me like this? Well, I love you so much. I'm going to haunt you even after I die. I wonder if he's like Falkland himself. There's a long line of romantic, giddy women readers in the tradition of the sentimental novel, as well as in theatre. Jane Austen is familiar with the rivals. Her family performed the play as entertainment at home when she was little. Do you see the influence of the play on Austen's novel, Sense and Sensibility? Most of you are a lot more familiar with Sense and Sensibility than the rivals, so I don't feel like I need to tell you what the novel is about. The most obvious is, of course, that there are two pairs of lovers in the play as well as in the novel. The second key thing is that one woman represents sense and the other represents sensibility. The two men are opposite each other as well as the two women in the play, while in the novel we are mainly led to compare and contrast the two sisters, Eleanor and Marianne. Marianne sounds very similar to Falkland. Marianne would have thought herself very inexcusable had she been able to sleep at all the first night after parting from Willoughby. She would have been ashamed to look her family in the face the next morning had she not risen from her bed in more need of repose than when she lay down in it. But the feelings which made such composure a disgrace left her in no danger of incurring it. She was awake the whole night, and she wept the greatest part of it. She got up with a headache, was unable to talk, and unwilling to take any nourishment, giving pain every moment to her mother and sisters, and forbidding all attempt at consolation from either. Her sensibility was potent enough. When breakfast was over, she walked out by herself and wandered about the village of Elm, indulging the recollection of past enjoyment and crying over the present reverse for the chief of the morning. The evening passed off in an equal indulgence of feeling. She played over every favourite song that she had been used to play to Willoughby, every air in which their voices had been oftenest joined, and sat at the instrument, gazing on every line of music that he had written out for her, till her heart was so heavy that no further sadness could be gained. And this nourishment of grief was every day applied. She spent whole hours at the pianoforte, alternately singing and crying, her voice often totally suspended by her tears. In books, too, as well as in music, she quoted the misery which a contrast between the past and present was certain of giving. She read nothing but what they had been used to read together. Falkland would think her a perfect lover. The chapter on Sense and Sensibility makes a very interesting point that though Marianne's romantic notion comes from sentimental novels like Lydia Languish, the cause of her misery is more like that of Falkland. Marianne and Falkland compulsively torture themselves and nurse their all-consuming heartbreak in a self-destructive way, while Lydia Languish is more like Catherine Morland in Northanger Abbey. They get over it and become happy again. It's just all great fun. There's a lot more to dig into the relationship between the rivals and Sense and Sensibility. If you're interested, I highly recommend you to read the chapter in The Genius of Jane Austen. So that's what I learned this year thanks to Jane Austen July. What about you? That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one.